At our 4th of July dinner, my sister introduced her new boyfriend. Her fiancé, she said. Funny. He never divorced me. She didn't know that. My mother did. Before I could speak, Mom cut in. Keep your mouth shut and don't embarrass us. My sister laughed. Or make something up, hon. The truth's too boring. 31 people heard her. I smiled. I'd been at that picnic table for 40 minutes. In plain sight. 31 people saw me. Not one of them told him I was there. Then the screen door opened. He came out with a glass of sweet tea. He saw me. He let it slip. You? The glass shattered across my mother's patio. My name is Colleen Brandt. I'm 41. For 10 years, this town has called me a liar. I washed the hair of the women who said it. I never said a word back. At the end of the driveway, a man had been waiting in a parked car since 5. I'd paid him $80. My husband thought I'd been cut out of this family. My mother told him so. She was right about that. She was wrong about what it cost her. 2 weeks before that dinner, my 16-year-old niece sent me a photograph she took in her grandmother's basement. That's where this starts. The water at Dorsey's runs scalding before it runs warm. You learn to hold your wrist under it and count to 4. Dorsey's beauty shop sits on Ohio Street in Moxham, close enough to the church that the same women who prayed about me on Sunday were in my chair on Tuesday. And in a town this size, where you get your hair done, is a public statement about whose side you're on. That Saturday, I had Roberta Klink in the bowl and her sister Nan under the dryer, and neither of them was talking to me. They were talking over me. September, Roberta said, out at the Legion Hall. She's doing it right this time. Nan turned a page. Not like the last one. I worked the shampoo through. Ronnie Dorsey caught my eye in the mirror and lifted his chin. An offer. I shook my head. My hands are fine, I said. He's a nice fella, the one she's marrying. Roberta set it to the ceiling. Warren. I rinsed. You know him? Nan asked. Not Roberta. The back of my head. Some, I said. That was the whole of what I said to a paying customer that morning. Some? My hands are fine. At 2, my niece came in off her shift, still in the work polo, smelling like fryer grease and lemon cleaner. Hey, Bug. Peyton got in the chair. I took 2 inches off, free, like always. She paid me anyway. She'd wait until I turned to sweep, then slide a folded 20 under the shampoo bottle and look real hard at her phone, like she'd found something on it. 17 20s by then. I kept them in a coffee can under the register. I had never spent one. Then Peyton texted me a picture. The photo hadn't loaded yet, just the gray box and the words underneath it. Isn't this Warren? The picture came through while I still had a comb in my hand. Moxham Union Church. The photo directory, the one they did in 2014, spiral bound. The kind that sits in a basement in every house in that congregation. Peyton had it flat on a concrete floor, and she'd shot it crooked with a bad flash. Page 11. I knew the face before I found the name. And under the face, in the church's own typeface, printed by the church, paid for by the church, Curtis W. Rhodes, volunteer driver, shut-in ministry, found it in Nana's basement getting chairs. Page 11. LOL. I set the comb down on the counter. I picked it back up. Roberta Klink still had a wet head, so I finished her out. Blow dry. Round brush. The little flip she likes at the ends. She told me it looked real nice, and I told her thank you, because she pays and she tips, and none of this was hers. I swept the floor. I hung the cape on its hook. Then I went into the back room and shut the door and texted my niece. It took me 4 tries to get the sentence down to something that wouldn't scare her. Where is he right now? She wrote back in 9 seconds. At Nana's. He's there all the time now I finished the haircut. Then I called the courthouse. Cambria County Prothanotary. I need to know whether a divorce decree was ever entered in my case. Keys. A pause that went on a beat too long. Ma'am, can you hold for me a minute? They put me on hold for 11 minutes, and then the line dropped. I did not call back that day. I want you to understand why, because it is the same reason 10 years of my life happened the way they did. I was afraid of the answer. If you have ever had the answer, one phone call away, and not made the call, because you already knew, hit subscribe and stay with me. That fear cost me 10 years. It was about to cost my sister a house. That night the texts came in a stack, the way they do with a kid who thinks in fragments. Mom says, you make things up. Nana says you're not welcome at the house. Then a third one, and Peyton wrote it the way you'd mention what you had for lunch. Nana's, the one who set them up, by the way. She found him. I read that, and I moved right past it. I want you to notice that. In that family, my mother was weather. You didn't investigate weather. You dressed for it. I typed, don't take anything out of that house. I deleted it. I typed, when is the wedding? She said, September. Then, unprompted, they're closing on the house, July 20. I sat down on the edge of the tub in my apartment with the phone in both hands. I hadn't walked through my mother's screen door in 4 years. Not since the Thanksgiving. I set a pie on the counter, and she asked me if I'd bought it, and I said yes, and she said, well, 4 years. The last text came in at 11:40. Nana said, you're not welcome. Come anyway. Every door in this story is one my mother is standing in. My car wouldn't turn over, so I went out to Curtis's truck for the jumper cables. That's it. That's how it started. November of 2015, a Tuesday, a dead battery, and a set of cables I knew he kept in the wheel well under the spare. I lifted the tire out and set it on the wet gravel, and the cables were there, and under the cables there was a checkbook, plastic cover, soft and warm from sitting next to the engine block. Winifred M. Tolliver. I knew who she was. Everybody knew who she was. 82 years old, third pew on the left, kept butterscotch candies in her purse and handed them out like communion. I opened it. The carbons were still in it. 4 of them. 2,000, 3,500, 4,000, 3,000. 2 of them said cash in the memo line, in handwriting that was not hers, and one of them said groceries in handwriting that was. I stood in my own driveway in the rain doing the arithmetic out loud, which is a thing I still don't understand about myself, and the number came out to $12,500. And while I was standing there, a sentence came up out of nowhere, in my mother's voice, from 2 years before, when she'd sat me down at her kitchen table and told me about the nice divorced fella who did the church's roof. He fixed my roof for nothing, Colleen. The porch light came on behind me. Curtis came out in his socks, carrying 2 coffees, one in each hand, and he stopped at the top of the steps and looked down at me. At the tire on the gravel, at the open wheel well, at the checkbook in my hand. I was holding it out in the open. I wasn't hiding a thing. You cold out here, Col? I'm fine. He nodded slow, like I'd said something reasonable, and he set my coffee down on the porch rail where I could reach it, and he went back inside. The screen door banged. He'd seen it. He didn't say a word. 2 days later, I sat in a plastic chair at the Johnstown police station with a cracked seam that cut into the back of my legs, and I gave them the checkbook. They wrote it up. They gave it a number. I still know the number. An officer went out to Winifred Tolliver's house on Ferndale Street. She sat in her recliner with her hands folded, and she told him, clear as a bell, in front of 2 officers and a neighbor. "Curtis is a good boy." She said it twice. She said he brought her mail up from the box. She said he took her to the bank on Tuesdays because she didn't drive anymore. She said the money was a gift and she'd give it again. She had early dementia. Some days she didn't. That was one of the days she didn't. On the 13th of November, my mother picked up the telephone and called the detective. Nobody asked her to. Nobody had put her name on anything. Nobody had knocked on her door. She looked up the number, and she dialed it, and she waited on hold, and when a man came on the line, she told him, "My daughter has always had a wild imagination." I know the exact words, because they are typed into the report. I know the date, because it is typed into the report. I did not read that line for another 11 years. They closed the case 2 weeks later. Unfounded. The detective called me himself, and his voice had changed. It had gone flat and careful, the way a voice goes when a man has decided you are a problem instead of a person. "Ma'am, your mother called us." I asked him what happened to the checkbook. He said it was evidence in a closed case, so it goes back to the account holder. It goes back to Mrs. Tolliver. I said, "He lives in her house 3 days a week." There was a pause on the line, and I have thought about that pause for 11 years, because a pause means a man heard you. "Then I guess she'll have it," he said. My mother called them. Nobody asked her to. He cooked me dinner that night. Pot roast. He was good at it. He set the table with the placemats, and he poured my water without me asking, and he ate every bite on his plate, and when he was done, he pushed the plate an inch away from himself and folded his hands and looked at me the way you look at a bill you have already paid. "They didn't believe you," he said. The kitchen clock was one of those white plastic ones from the drugstore. Now who's going to believe you about anything? I got up and I ran the sink. I ran it too hot. I stood there with my hands in it, and my hands went red, and I did not take them out. That was the whole of what I did about it, that night. That was the night I stopped being a person who calls people. 2 weeks later, I walked up a flight of stairs over a shoe repair on Main Street and sat down across from a man named Dwayne Hasslinger, who was 57 then, with reading glasses pushed up into his hair and a coffee ring on his blotter. I told him the whole thing in about 9 minutes. He didn't interrupt me. He didn't make a face. When I was done, he took the glasses down off his head, and he wrote 3 short lines on the intake sheet, and then he turned the folder over so I couldn't see it. Then he explained to me what I was actually going to do. "You're not just filing for divorce," Hasslinger said. "You're filing for equitable distribution, marital assets, which means he has to open his books to this court, and it means at some point he sits in a room with a court reporter, and I get to ask him, under oath, where $12,500 of Winifred Tolliver's money went." He slid the complaint across. The pen on his desk didn't work. He took the one out of his own shirt pocket and handed it to me, and I signed with that. I filed on the 8th of December. He walked me down the stairs afterward and stopped on the landing, one hand on the rail. "Colleen, there's something you ought to know about the way a man fights a divorce." I didn't hear the rest. I was already thinking about where I was going to sleep. He didn't fight it. He did something else. Nobody in Moxham ever called me a liar to my face. That is not how it works. What happens is that the woman who has done your hair for 8 years suddenly has no openings. What happens is that a name comes off a sign-up sheet in a church basement, and nobody tells you it came off. What happens is that the phone stops. I lost my chair at the shop I'd been at since I was 23. They didn't fire me. They just stopped booking me, and then they were very sorry, and then it was March. Ronnie Dorsey hired me in a 4-minute interview. He asked me if I could do a perm and I said yes. He asked me if I showed up when it snowed, and I said yes. Then he said, I heard some things. I started to open my mouth. I don't need to know, Ronnie said. I need somebody who shows up. He handed me a set of keys and went in the back to eat his sandwich. I worked in that shop for 10 years, and Ronnie Dorsey never asked me one question about any of it. That spring, a woman I had never met sat down in my chair. A friend of somebody's cousin, in from Windber, no idea in the world who she was talking to. And while I had my hands in her hair, she told me the whole story of the Brandt girl. I heard she made the whole thing up for the divorce, she said, to get money out of him. Off an old lady, if you can believe that. The water was going. You know her? She said. Some. I washed her hair. I gave her a good cut. I sent that woman out the door happy, and she left me $4. And here's the part I need you to hear, because it is the part people get wrong about a town like this. The church never threw me out. Nobody voted. Nobody said a word. They just stopped saying my name. And around that same time, Winifred Tolliver stopped coming to church at all, and nobody asked why. In March, Winnie Tolliver died. She was 82. I stood in the hallway of the funeral home at Franklin Street, outside the room, with my coat still on. I didn't go in. I could see through the gap where the doors were folded back. Third row from the front, on the family side, which is a thing I still think about, the family side. My mother was sitting next to Curtis, and while the organ was going, she reached over and put her hand flat on his back, between his shoulder blades, and left it there. The carpet in that hallway was green and worn through in a path down the middle. I want to be precise about what that was. It was not comfort. My mother is not a comforting woman. She has never once in my life rubbed my back. What that was ownership. That was a woman putting her hand on a thing to show a room that the thing was hers and that it was fine. Then somebody stood up. An old woman, way in the back on the far side, small, in a navy coat. She stood up in the middle of the service, and she said it loud enough that the organ player looked up. Who witnessed it? I didn't know her. I had never seen her before in my life. 2 men got up on either side of her, and each of them took an elbow, gently the way you do, and they sat her back down. Somebody in the row behind her said, Elva, sit down, Elva. And the organ kept going. Nobody answered her. I stood in that hallway another minute, and then I went out to the parking lot and sat in my car until my hand stopped. Witnessed what? The will was probated that summer. Winifred Tolliver left her house at 14 Ferndale Street and what was left in her savings, $38,000, to Curtis W. Rhodes. Ronnie read it out of the paper at the front counter, half to me and half to the room. I kept sweeping. You gonna say something? He said. I remember exactly where my hands were. I remember the broom. To who, Ronnie? He folded the page and put it down by the register and let it go, because that is the kind of man he is. I never asked how that woman's house became his. Not once, in 10 years. I told myself she was old and she was fond of him, and old women are fond of men who carry their groceries. I was busy losing mine. That August, somebody filed to contest the will. 4 lines in the legal notices, back of the paper, under the sheriff's sales. Ronnie read that out loud too, because he reads everything out loud. I was on the phone with the prothonotary about a filing fee, and I did not hear one word of it. That February, they withdrew it. Nobody told me that either. In the spring of 2017, a customer mentioned that the Rhodes fella had sold the Tolliver house and gone. $61,000. He packed a truck and he left Johnstown, and he did not tell his wife he was going. Somebody contested that will. Then they stopped. I did not learn that woman's name for 10 years. I learned it in a records room at the courthouse, 1 month before my sister was supposed to close on a house. He never once contested the divorce. I want to be clear about that, because for years I told the story wrong. I said he fought me. He didn't fight me. He never stood up in a single room and argued that he should stay married to me. What he fought was the paper. Every time Hasslinger filed to make him produce his bank records, Curtis's lawyer produced something else instead. An objection, a request for an extension, a motion I don't remember the name of. And every time, Hasslinger had to file a motion to compel, and every motion to compel cost $600. $600. That's what it costs to make a man answer a question in Cambria County. He did it 4 times in 4 months. I paid it 4 times. And then he did it a 5th. And Hasslinger came out into the hallway with the bill in his hand, and he had a look on his face like he was the one who had to apologize. "He's not fightin' to keep you," Hasslinger said. "He's fightin' to keep you out of a deposition." I looked at the number at the bottom of the page. "How much for the next one?" I said. That was my whole response. I have thought about that a lot. He handed me the sentence that explained my entire life, and I asked him how much. By the middle of the next year, I had spent $6,800, which was everything I had. And I stopped. Hasslinger withdrew because I couldn't pay him. He didn't dress it up. He said, "I can't work for free, Colleen. I've got a girl in college." I said, "I know." I shook his hand. And the case just sat there. Nobody dismissed it. Nobody ruled on anything. It sat in a drawer in the prothenotary's office in Ebensburg, like a coat somebody left in a diner. It was still sitting in that drawer on the 4th of July, while 31 people ate potato salad in my mother's backyard. I heard that sentence about the deposition 10 years later. In September of 2017, I lost my apartment. My mother put me in the sewing room. There was a fold-out cot along the wall, and her Singer machine shoved into the corner with a piece of green fabric still under the needle. She made the cot up herself while I stood in the doorway with a garbage bag of my clothes. And she pulled the corners tight, and she did not look at me one time while she did it. Then she straightened up and put her hands on her hips and said the only condition: "We don't mention that business in this house." I nodded. That's it. That's the whole scene. My mother gave me a bed and I gave her my mouth, and we shook on it without shaking on it. And I lived in that room for 4 months and slept 18 inches from that sewing machine, and I did not say his name once. Here's the part that mattered. Neither of us knew it at the time. My address on the court file was hers, 1122 Ohio Street. I'd put it down when I moved in, and I never changed it, because I never had an address I trusted again, and because by the time I had my own place, the case was a thing I did not look at. Everything the Court of Common Pleas of Cambria County ever mailed me about my own marriage, for the rest of my life, went to my mother's mailbox. I nodded. That address stayed on my file. Remember it. 1122 Ohio Street. 10 years is not a story. 10 years is a shape. I cut hair. I paid down the $6,800 at a time. I got a 1-bedroom over the pizza place on Bond Street, and I bought a couch off a woman for $40 and carried it up the stairs myself. Peyton was a little girl in a booster seat when this started. She is 16 now. She is the only reason you are hearing any of this. And in all that time, I never once said the word divorced. I said it's over. I said I used to be married. I said my ex, and I said it easy, the way everybody says it. I never said divorced. And I never looked at a piece of paper with his name on it, and I want you to understand that those two facts are the same fact. Looking would have meant he was still real. So I didn't look. For 10 years, I didn't look. In February of 2020, my mother came around the kitchen table with a dish towel over her shoulder, and she put her hand on my shoulder. She has never done that. Not before, and not since. "It's over, honey," she said. I saw the paper. I closed my eyes. That is the last time I remember being relieved about anything, and I want you to sit with what I just told you, because it is going to matter more than anything else in this story. She had seen a paper. That part is true. My father died the next year. Kendra came home from Harrisburg in 2025 with Peyton and a divorce of her own and a settlement check. And my mother started having Sunday dinners again, and I was not invited to those, and that was fine. For 10 years, I let my mother tell me what had happened to my own life. The counter at the prothenotary's office in Ebensburg is for Micah, and it is cold, and I put both hands flat on it and left them there. I had come to get a copy of my divorce decree. That was all. Because if my sister was going to look me in the face and call me a liar, I was going to have the paper. The clerk typed. She stopped. She typed again. "Ma'am, I don't have a decree. It's from 2015. I see the case." She turned the monitor a half inch, the way people do when they want you to believe them. It was terminated. February 10th, 2020. Inactivity. Terminated means finished. "No, hun," she said it kindly. That's the part I keep coming back to. She said it kindly. Terminated means it stopped. I looked at her. "The case stopped," she said. "The marriage didn't." The heat vent under the counter came on. I could feel it on my ankles. "Ma'am." She leaned in a little, and she got quieter, because she had just figured out what she was holding. "Ma'am, you're married." I stood there with my hands on that formica, and I did not move them. Behind her, a printer was running. Somebody in the back was laughing at something. "Was anything ever mailed to me?" I said. She scrolled. There was a notice. 30 days warning, before they close it out. Certified. November of 2019 to... She read my mother's address off the screen. 1122 Ohio Street. "Certified," I said. "So somebody signed for it." She said yes. She said the green card comes back to the court and it goes in the file, and she asked if I wanted a copy of the file, and I said yes. It took her 9 minutes. The green card is about the size of a playing card, and it is the flimsiest piece of paper the United States government produces. And on the back of it, on the line that says signature, in a hand I have known since I could read, M. Sir Brandt, with a loop on the B, a big soft loop that comes back around and crosses itself. She signed for it. She signed her own name on a federal receipt, and she took my marriage out of my mailbox and she carried it up the driveway in her housecoat. I walked out through the metal doors and across the lot, and I got into my car, and I sat there with the keys in my hand and the wheel going hot under my palms, and I did not cry, and I did not call anybody. I did arithmetic. My mother gets the mail at 11 in the morning. She has gotten the mail at 11 in the morning since before I was born. She walks down to the box in her housecoat with her arms crossed against her chest, and she brings it up, and she stands at the counter and goes through it, envelope by envelope, junk in one pile and bills in the other. In my whole life in that house, I never once got to that box before she did. Not once. And in February of 2020, 3 months after she signed that green card, my mother came around that kitchen table and put her hand on my shoulder and said, "It's over, honey." I saw the paper. She did. She read it. She understood exactly what it said. And then she went and found her daughter and told her the opposite, and she touched me while she did it, which is the only time she ever has. A train went by down along the river, and I could hear it from the parking lot. She read it. Then she told me it was over. She didn't do it for Curtis. I want that clear. So what was it for? I went back in. The clerk saw me coming and she got up off her stool. If I'd gotten that letter, I said, in 2019, if it had come to me, what would I have had to do? She reached under the counter and pulled out a form and slid it across. One sheet. Printed one side. 6 lines to fill in. You'd have filed a statement of intention to proceed, she said. Says you still want your case. It's 1 page. What does it cost? She was already reaching for a pen on a chain, so she didn't look up. There's no fee, hun. I heard it. I did not react. No fee, I said. No fee. She looked up then, and whatever was on my face, she took a step back from the counter and put both hands flat on it, the way you'd steady a table. Hun, she said, are you all right? I asked her how often this happens. Not the termination. The other part. Somebody walking in here at 41 years old and finding out. She looked at the form on the counter between us for a second. You'd be surprised, hun, she said. I took the form. I folded it in half and put it in my purse and said, thank you. My mother did not take 10 years from me. She took 1 page. Before I tell you what I found next, and it was worse, and it had my mother's handwriting on it, I want to know what you would have done, standing at that counter. You have just learned that the person who told you your life was over was the same person who ended it. Do you go to her? Do you go to the police? Or do you go and find out how deep it goes first, knowing that once you know, you cannot stop knowing? If you have ever been handed a lie by somebody you loved and thanked them for it, put 1 page in the comments. I read them. The register of wills is on a different floor. The woman there gave me white cotton gloves and asked me not to eat at the table. I hadn't come for a will. I had come for a deed. An old woman's checkbook. An old woman's house. A new woman's house closing on the 20th of July. I was going to hand the shape to a lawyer and let him tell me what it was. Estate of Winifred M. Tolliver. The box smelled like a basement. Inventory. Notice to creditors. A funeral bill. And the will, executed the 19th of January, 2016. 2 months and 10 days after Winnie Tolliver told a police officer that Curtis was a good boy. I turned to the last page. 2 witness lines. The first one I didn't know. The second one said Mary Beth Brandt, and the B at the front of Brandt has a loop on it. A big soft loop that comes back around and crosses itself. I have been getting that loop on birthday cards since I was 4 years old, and I had seen it 20 minutes earlier, 1 floor down, on the back of a green card. I put my finger on it and did not take it off. And in that room, with the gloves on, I heard an old woman's voice out of a funeral home hallway 10 years ago. Who witnessed it? The clerk came over and asked if I needed anything. How much are copies? I said. 2 witness lines. The second one was my mother. And underneath the will, one more thing. A petition to contest, filed that August by a woman named Elva Tolliver. A home telephone number typed at the bottom. Elva Tolliver's kitchen table has a vinyl cloth with cherries on it, and a burn mark near one corner shaped like an iron. She was 80. She opened the door 6 inches, looked at me a while, then opened it the rest of the way. I had a whole thing prepared. I didn't get to any of it. I brought you a casserole, Elva said. December of 2016. I stood on your mother's porch and knocked. I could hear the television going. Nobody came, so I set it on the step. "You never opened the door," she said. I opened my mouth, and what came out was not a word. It was air, and it broke in the middle. And I put the back of my hand over my mouth and stood in that doorway like a fool. She stepped aside and told me to sit down. Winnie was her oldest sister. 6 of them, Elva said. Winnie first, her last. Now there was just her. She had filed to contest that will and pulled it 6 months later. She told me why. My lawyer said we'd lose. They had a witness, a church-going woman with a good name in this town, and I was a bitter old maid out of Johnstown. He said a jury would take 9 minutes. She went into another room. I heard a drawer. She came back with a shoebox, and out of it she took 1 sheet of stationery, the thin kind you can see the lamp through. She held it flat with both hands so it wouldn't shake. She did not hand it to me. She read it to me. Dated the 9th of November, 2015. 4 days after I walked into the police station. The handwriting went uphill at the end of every line. Elva, I have done a foolish thing, and I do not know how to undo it. Curtis has been taking me to the bank, and I have been signing what he puts in front of me, because he is kind to me, and because I did not want him to think I was a mean old woman. I told Mary Beth Brandt about it after service. I thought she would help me. She told me not to make trouble. She said her daughter has always been jealous, so I have not told anyone else. Please do not be angry with me. I am not what I was. Elva put the letter down on the cherries. The refrigerator clicked on, and then it clicked off again. She wrote about you, Elva said. 2 letters after that one. She said you were the only one in that church who didn't talk to her like she was already gone. I sat in that woman's kitchen, and I did not move. She put the letter back in the shoebox. Then she took it out again, went to an old copier in her dining room, and ran off a copy. "You take the copy," she said. "I keep the original." I didn't ask her why. She had been holding that letter for 10 years. Nobody came. I sat in my car outside Elva Tolliver's house with the copy on the passenger seat, and the sun curled the edge of it up. And I stopped being angry at Curtis Rhodes. I know how that sounds. But I finally had all of it in one place, and it was not the shape I'd been building. My mother tells me about a nice divorced fella who fixed the church roof for nothing. November 2015. Winnie Tolliver tells my mother that a man is walking her into a bank. My mother tells her to keep it to herself, and uses me to do it. She says her daughter has always been jealous. 5 days later. My mother calls a detective, on her own, and tells him her daughter makes things up. January 2016. My mother signs the witness line on the will that moves that old woman's house into his hands, in her good handwriting. With the loop on the B. November 2019. My mother signs for a certified letter about her own daughter's marriage and throws it in the trash. 3 months later, she puts her hand on my shoulder and says, "I saw the paper. My baby sister comes home with $128,000. And my mother goes and gets him and brings him back and sits him down at Sunday dinner. My mother never took $1. That's what people won't understand. She was never in it for the money, and people are going to ask me how a woman does that to her favorite child. She didn't think she was doing anything to Kendra. In my mother's head, he was never a thief. He couldn't be. Because if he was a thief, then she was the woman who married her own daughter off to one and then went and told a detective that daughter makes things up. So she didn't bring a thief home. She brought home the proof. She was going to sit that man at her table for 30 years. And every Sunday he passed the potatoes was going to be one more Sunday I was wrong. If Curtis Rhodes was a good man, then Mary Beth Brandt was never wrong. She picked him. She vouched for him. She put her name on him in front of God and the Cambria County Register of Wills. And everything she did for 10 years was one more brick in the wall around 6 words she could not survive. I made a mistake. That's the whole thing. Keep your mouth shut and don't embarrass us. Us was never this family. Us was her. Dwayne Hasslinger is 68 now, and he did not recognize me when I walked in. Then he did, and he stood up too fast and knocked his glasses off the desk. He went down into the storage room himself. Wouldn't let me help. He came back with a banker's box and cut the tape with a key. He found the folder. He opened it. He stopped. He turned it around and pushed it across to me, the intake sheet, the one he turned over so I couldn't see it, in December of 2015, with a 30-year-old woman sitting where I sat now. Blue ink. 3 lines. Client is credible. Client is frightened. Client is right. I never shredded it, he said. I don't know why. I got up and asked him where the bathroom was, and I ran the tap and stood there. When I came back out, he had not moved the folder, and he did not say one word about it. Then he went to work. He pulled the police report and read it out loud in a flat voice, the way a man reads a thing he has read 10,000 times. Then he stopped in the middle of a line. He read it again to himself. He turned the page around. Complainant's mother contacted this officer by telephone, November 13th, 2015. States complainant has a history of exaggeration. States there is no cause for concern. He sat back in his chair. Colleen, you never gave them her name. No. So how'd she know to call? He put his glasses down. There are 2 ways my mother knew I had walked into that police station. Winnie Tolliver told her. Or he did. I have spent this whole year hoping it was Winnie. Now, anybody buying a house signs an affidavit of marital status. It goes to the title company. It's notarized, and it asks one question. He looked at me over the top of the frames. In June, Curtis Rhodes swore, under a notary's seal, that he is an unmarried man. And he isn't. No, ma'am. He's married to you. He might not know that. Hasslinger looked at me a long time. He didn't fight that case, Colleen. He held it under the water till it quit movin'. A man who pays a lawyer $600 a throw, 4 and 5 times over, to keep from sittin' in a room with a court reporter, that man knows exactly what a decree looks like. He folded his hands. And he knows he hasn't got one. So I can call the FBI field office in Pittsburgh this afternoon and hand them a mortgage fraud case, or the district attorney, or we can do something else. He waited. But I need you to tell me what you want. I want it on paper. That was all I said. I called my sister on the 20th of June from the back room at Dorsey's, with the door shut and a dryer running out front so loud I had to put a finger in my other ear. She picked up on the second ring. Colleen. I hadn't heard her voice in 2 years. Kendra, I need to tell you something about Warren, and I need you to just... Mom told me you'd do this. I stopped. She said you'd call. Kendra's voice was very calm, and that was worse than screaming. She said you'd call before the wedding. She said you'd say he was your husband. She said you've been saying things like this since I was in high school. I stood in that back room with a finger in my ear. You understand what happened there. She didn't call me a liar. She didn't have to. My mother had gone in months ahead of me and said the true thing out loud as a prophecy about a lie, so that when the true thing finally came, it arrived sounding exactly like the prophecy coming true. My sister was not stupid. My sister had been loaded. Kendra. His name is Curtis Rhodes. I know his name. She was crying now, and angry about crying. He told me about the name. He goes by his middle name because of a bad marriage. And I asked Mom. I asked her, Colleen, because I am not an idiot. I said, Mom, Branton Rhodes, isn't that? And she said Rhodes is thick as fleas in Somerset County. She stopped. She laughed at me, Kendra said. Kendra, I'm hanging up. Ask him where he was in November of 2015. Nothing. Don't ask Mom. Ask him. She blocked me before I got the phone away from my ear. She had been trained to. I sat with it for 8 days. I want to tell you what I thought about, because if I leave it out, then the rest of this is a lie by omission, and I have had enough of those. I could do nothing. That was a real option. It was on the table, and I looked at it every night for 8 nights. If I did nothing, the closing went through on the 20th of July. Curtis Rhodes would go on the deed of a house my sister bought with $128,000 of divorce money and my father's life insurance. And then, in a year, or in 8 months, or in whatever amount of time it took, he would do to her exactly what he did to Winnie Tolliver and exactly what he did to me. And he would leave, and Kendra would be ruined, and my mother would have to stand in her own kitchen and watch it happen to her favorite child, done by the man she went out and got and brought home and put at her table. That would have been justice. I thought about it. I want you to know that some nights I thought about it and felt better. On the 3rd night, my niece texted me a picture of a room with no furniture in it. I'm at the new house this week. My room's the one with the window seat. There was a child in that house. Hasslinger typed the new complaint himself, with 2 fingers, because he does not trust the girl he hired to spell. Divorce, equitable distribution, and a request for the production of every account Curtis W. Rhodes held between 2013 and 2017. He filed it on the 29th of June. The number the prothonotary gave it is not one I will ever forget, and it means nothing to anybody but me. The next day he wrote a letter. Not to Curtis, not to my sister, not to the police, to the title company. He read it to me before he sent it, sitting on the edge of his desk with the page held out at arm's length, because his glasses were somewhere else. It said that in June, the buyer named Curtis W. Rhodes executed a notarized affidavit stating that he was unmarried. It said that a marriage between Curtis W. Rhodes and Colleen Brandt was solemnized in Cambria County in 2013 and remains in effect. It said that no decree of divorce has ever been entered. It said that this letter constituted notice of a potential material misrepresentation in a sworn document and in a federally related mortgage application. It attached the certified copies. That was the whole cage. No court order, no police, no handcuffs. A letter from a lawyer to a title company, and a title company that is in the business of insuring against exactly one thing: the risk that the paper is wrong. You want me to copy your sister? Hasslinger said. No. She's got a right to know. She'd never see it, I said. Nobody's living in that house yet. There's a lockbox on the door, and there is one man in this family who's over there every day. He looked at me for a second, and then he licked the flap of the manila envelope and pressed it shut with his fist. Colleen, you understand what happens next is not up to you. I know. They notify the buyers, both of them, at the property address. I know. The discovery request went out the same day. I didn't build a trap. I stopped holding the door. Vaughn Settler eats his lunch in his car. That's how I found him. He was parked outside the courthouse in a Buick, with the window down, eating a sandwich out of tinfoil, and Hasslinger pointed at him through the glass and said, "That's the fella. He served papers for a living. He was 55 and he had a clipboard on the passenger seat and a folding chair in the trunk. He didn't ask me what it was about. 4th of July, he said, chewing. Family thing? Yes. Address? I gave him my mother's. He wrote it down and read it back to me and asked what time people would be there. And I said all afternoon, and he said he would be there from 5. Then he set the sandwich down. Now listen. I'll be at the end of the driveway. I don't come in the yard. I don't come up on the porch. I don't come in unless... He stopped and reworded it. I hand it to a man on a public street. That's the whole job. If he don't leave, I don't serve him, and you don't get anything, and I still get paid. $80, I said. $80. I had 80 in tips, folded in my apron pocket, damp from my hands. The coffee can was on top of my refrigerator with 17 20s in it. I did not open the can. The night before the 4th, Ronnie Dorsey closed the shop an hour early, which he has not done in 10 years. Not for a funeral and not for a blizzard. I came out of the back and he had the ironing board up in the middle of the floor. He was pressing my blue shirt. He didn't look up. He just kept going. Across the yoke, then the collar, then down each sleeve, the way you press a shirt properly, and the steam came up around his hands, and the whole shop smelled like hot cotton. He hung it on the door frame where the light was. Wear the blue one, Ronnie said. It don't wrinkle. If you have ever had a Ronnie Dorsey in your life, somebody who heard the whole town talking and never once asked you a single question, hit the like button. That one isn't for me. That one's for him. I wrote the rule on the back of a receipt and put it in my shirt pocket. One question, then nothing. That's the whole plan. That is what I brought to my mother's 4th of July cookout. One question, a manila envelope, and a rule written on the back of a receipt for shampoo. I was not going to make a speech. I was not going to read documents out loud in a yard, or hold up a piece of paper, or say the sentence I had been writing in my head for 10 years. I have watched my mother win an argument in that house every day of my life, and I know exactly how she does it. She lets you talk. She lets you talk until you are loud. And then she looks around the room, and the room decides that you are the problem. They have had 10 years of practice talking. I have had 10 years of practice not. If they want to bury themselves, they can use their own shovels. 2 days before, I drove out to Elva Tolliver's house and I put the copy of that letter on the vinyl cloth between us and told her everything I had. The green card, the witness line, the affidavit, the closing on the 20th. Then I stood up to go, and I said the only 2 sentences I had come to say. He'll be at my mother's on the 4th. She didn't answer me. Elva, I'm not asking you to do anything. She walked me to the door and she held the screen open with her hip, and she said, "Drive safe, hun." That's all she said. And somewhere in those 8 days, the thing in my chest changed shape. It stopped being hot. I stopped picturing him in handcuffs, and I stopped picturing my mother crying, and what was left was smaller and much harder, and it fit in a pocket. I don't need him ruined. I need it written down. At 20 to 10 the night before the 4th, my phone lit up on the arm of the couch. Nana has a box of Xmas cards in the basement. From him. Every year. There's like 8. I read it 3 times. Then I asked her to send me one. She sent a picture of a card with a cardinal on it, and inside it, in a hand that slants hard to the right, Mary Beth, still kickin'. How's the girls? W. postmarked Altoona. December of 2021. He left Johnstown in the spring of 2017. He sold a dead woman's house, and he packed a truck, and he did not tell his wife he was going. And every December after that, he sent my mother a card, and every December after that, she walked down to that box at 11 o'clock in the morning in her house coat, and she brought it up, and she read it, and she carried it down the basement stairs and put it in a box. How's the girls? She did not throw a single one of them away. You didn't find him, Mom. You kept him. And when my sister came home in 2025 with $128,000, you knew exactly which drawer to go to. Before I walk you into that yard, subscribe. Whatever you think is about to happen at that picnic table, it isn't. I parked on the street and walked in, and I sat down at the picnic table in the middle of my mother's backyard at 25 to 6 in the afternoon. I did not hide. I want that understood, because it is the only thing I did that day that took any courage at all. I sat in the middle of that yard in a blue shirt, in plain sight, with a manila envelope face down under my hands. She came out at 20 to 6. She stood on the top step with the screen door held open behind her with one hand, and she looked at me across 40 feet of grass, and then she came halfway down. You're not welcome, my mother said. There were 6 people at the horseshoe pit and 2 women at the drinks table, and Bill Klink was standing at the grill with a spatula in his hand. Peyton invited me, I said. I said it at a normal volume. I didn't shout. I just didn't lower my voice. And in that yard, that is the same as shouting. My mother's chin came up about 1/4 of an inch. She could not throw me out. Not with Bill Klink standing right there holding a spatula. Not without a scene. And my mother would open a vein before she would allow a scene. Then sit where I can see you, she said. She went back inside and the screen door banged. For the next 35 minutes, my mother stood in her kitchen. I know what she was doing now. She was standing between 2 rooms. She was keeping him in there with her, and she was waiting for me to get bored and go home. And every few minutes she came to the window over the sink and looked out at the picnic table. And I was still there. 40 minutes by then, in plain sight. And in all that time, 31 people ate potato salad in that yard, and not one of them told him I was there, not because they were protecting me, not because they were on my side, because I was the liar. And the liar sitting at the picnic table is not news. For 10 years, being invisible is what ruined me. That afternoon, it is what ambushed him. At 6:15, my sister tapped a plastic fork against a plastic cup, and everybody went quiet the way people do, half laughing, holding their plates. Everybody. This is my fiancé. This is Warren. I opened my mouth. And my mother came out of that kitchen fast. She was already moving. She was already loud. And I understand now that she was not shutting me up out of habit. She was buying 4 more seconds. Keep your mouth shut and don't embarrass us. My sister laughed. Or make something up, hun. The truth's too boring. 31 people heard her. I smiled. Then the screen door opened. He came out with a glass of sweet tea in his hand. He was 3 steps down before he looked up. He saw me at the picnic table. The glass went out of his hand and broke on the concrete, and the tea went everywhere, across the patio and in under the grill, and nobody moved. You? I did not stand up. How do you know me, Curtis? 31 people turned their heads. Not toward him. Toward my sister. Because everybody in that yard had just heard a man they had been calling Warren for 8 months get called something else. An answer to it. Kendra's cup was still in her hand. Warren. Her voice came out wrong. Who is that? He had a hand up. He was smiling. He has a very good smile. We knew each other, he said. Years back. It's nothing. Before I was divorced. Divorced from who? He looked at my mother. That was the mistake. He looked at my mother in front of everybody, the way a man looks at somebody who is supposed to handle it. And my mother, with nobody asking her anything, with not one single person in that yard so much as saying her name, my mother said, "This is ancient history. It was supposed to be handled after the wedding." Bill Clink put the spatula down on the edge of the grill. Nobody had asked my mother anything, and over by the drinks table, an old woman said it to nobody at all, in the voice you use when a thing has been sitting in you a long time. I told Mary Beth I knew that face. She told me I was getting old. That is how a man lives 8 months in a town this size with his picture in a book in every basement in the congregation. He didn't hide. She hid him. Anybody who said the name got told they were old, or jealous, or making things up. She had 10 years of practice at that. I turned the envelope over and slid 2 pages out onto the picnic table, and I laid them flat, side by side. Then I sat back down. I did not push them toward anyone. I did not say what they were. A certified marriage certificate, Cambria County, October of 2013, and a printout from the prothonotary stating that no decree of divorce has ever been entered. Kendra came across that grass and picked them up. She read the first one. She read the second one twice. "What county?" she said. She was not talking to me. "What county did you get divorced in, Warren?" He said, "Blair." I slid the 3rd page across the table. Blair County. A certified search. No record of any divorce action involving Curtis W. Rhodes. Ever. Hasslinger had pulled 4 of them. Blair, Somerset, Westmoreland, Indiana. They were all in that envelope, in order, because neither of us knew which one he was going to pick. He picked the first one. He didn't look at it. He turned on me. "She walked out on me 10 years ago." He was loud now. He was pointing. "She went to the cops over nothing. She's been telling this story her whole life. That old woman gave me those checks." The yard went quiet. Nobody had said the word checks. Not me. Not Kendra. Not one person in that yard had said the word checks. The screen door opened again. Elva Tolliver came through it. 80 years old, in a navy coat in July. She had come up the driveway and through my mother's kitchen and out into the yard, and nobody stopped her, because nobody stops an old woman with a purse. She had a piece of paper in her hand. She did not make a speech. She stood at the bottom of the steps, and she put her glasses on, and she held that letter out flat with both hands, and everybody in that yard watched it shake. She read one line. I told Mary Beth. She told me not to make trouble. She lowered the paper. "That's my sister's hand," Elva said. "She's been dead 10 years. Nobody said anything, and then a lawn chair scraped. Dovie Kleinfelter is 84 years old, and she has sat in that yard every 4th of July for 30 years, and nobody had asked her one single thing. She got up. She had to use the arms of the chair to do it. "He drove me to the bank in March," Dovie said. Somebody said, "Oh, God." I signed something. She was looking at the pastor, not at Curtis. He told me it was for the church. The pastor came to Moxham Union in 2019. He had never in his life met a man named Curtis Rhodes. March, 4 months, he never stopped. He was never going to stop. And that yard, that church, those women, that potato salad, had handed him another one. Kendra took her phone out. She did not call the police. She called the title company and she put it on speaker. She held the phone flat on her palm in the middle of my mother's yard, and 31 people stood in the grass and listened to a recording tell her the office was closed for the holiday. Then they listened to her leave a message. "This is Kendra Brandt, 9 Sunbury Road." She had stopped crying. That was the part nobody expected. "Remove Curtis Rhodes from everything I signed. From the deed. From the loan. From all of it. I'm not closing." She hung up. Then she took the ring off. She didn't throw it. She walked 4 steps to the picnic table, and she set it down on the wood next to the certified copy of my marriage certificate, and she left it there. Nobody arrested him. That is not what happened. Nobody in that yard did one thing to Curtis Rhodes. The pastor got up and walked across the grass and sat down in the lawn chair next to Dovie Kleinfelter, and he took her hand, and he did not look back at the patio. That was the whole verdict. Curtis Rhodes walked down my mother's driveway, and a man got out of a Buick at the end of it. I didn't watch. "Mom," Kendra was standing very still. "Mom, I asked you." My mother's hands were at her sides. "I asked you if Rhodes was—" "I was protecting this family," my mother said. And I stood up from the picnic table. "No, Mary Beth. She has never been called that by me. Not once. Not in 41 years. And when I said it, her head came around like I had put a hand on her. You were protecting the version of you that never had to apologize. That's all. That is everything I said in that yard." Kendra picked up her bag. She called for Peyton, and Peyton came out from behind the garage, where she had been standing the entire time with her phone down at her side, and the two of them walked out through the side gate. On the way past, my 16-year-old niece stopped at the picnic table. She took my hand for about 2 seconds. Then she kept going. 19 minutes. Nobody swept up the glass. I did one thing at that dinner. I declined to hold the door. And some of you are sitting there right now thinking about a door in your own family. A house you don't go into anymore. A screen door you can hear in your sleep. A person standing in it, telling you what did and did not happen to your own life. If there is one of those in your life, tell me about it in the comments. I read them, and I answer the ones I can. And if you want to know how the rest of it went, because there is a rest of it, subscribe, and I'll tell you. The coffee can lives on top of my refrigerator. The plastic lid is cracked all the way across. Some weeks after the 4th, Peyton got up in my chair on a Saturday. She didn't want to cut. She just sat and spun a half turn and stopped. I got the can down and set it in her lap. She got the lid off and went very quiet. She counted them out on her knee. She got to 17. She looked up at me. "You never spent it. I was saving it for something." That is the closest my voice has ever come to going out from under me in front of another person. It went out on the word something. My niece pretended not to notice, which is a kindness I did not teach her, and neither did her mother. I asked her one thing that day. I asked her why she never lifted that phone in the yard. 16 years old, standing behind a garage, watching the whole thing come down, and she never once raised it. She said, "Because you didn't." Roberta Klink got in my chair in August. She has been coming to me for 10 years, and I do not believe she had ever once looked at me in that mirror. She looked at me in that mirror. "Nobody's seen your mother at church," she said. "Not since the 4th. I ran the water until it went warm. "I know," I said. That was the whole of what I said to a paying customer that morning. Here is where it stands. The discovery is open. Those bank records are coming out of a vault whether he likes it or not, and he has not filed one page in response. Hasslinger says silence is its own kind of answer. The mortgage fraud referral is with the U.S. Attorney in Pittsburgh, And the Johnstown police opened a file. Not Winnie's. Winnie has been dead 10 years. They opened one for Dovie Kleinfelter, who is alive, and who signed something in March. And one more thing. Because I told you at the start I was going to tell you the truth. The title company mailed their notice to 9 Sunbury Road on the 1st of July. Certified. Nobody lived in that house yet. There was a lockbox on the door, and there was one man in that family who had the code and who was over there every single day. He signed for it. He took my sister's letter out of a slot in a door, the same way my mother took mine out of a box at the end of a driveway. And then he didn't run. He drove that letter up to 1122 Ohio Street, and he put it in my mother's hands, because in 8 months he had learned what took me 41 years. There is nothing that woman will not make disappear rather than be wrong. She had 3 days. She was going to handle it after the wedding. She stood in her own backyard and told 31 people so. He may never go to prison. I want you to hear me say that. I am not going to lie to you at the end after telling you the truth for an hour. It's written down. That's what I came for. I drove past 1122 Ohio Street on a Tuesday in the fall. The porch light was on. She has left it on every night since I was a little girl. For a husband who is dead and 2 daughters who don't come. Behind it, the screen door was shut. I did not stop. We have not spoken. There will be no scene in a hospital room where she takes my hand and says my name. I have made my peace with that. If you are waiting for that scene in your own life, stop waiting. And I have not forgiven the woman I used to be. The one who nodded in the sewing room. The one who did not look at a piece of paper for 10 years. I don't forgive her. I just don't need her to apologize to me anymore. Kendra and I are not friends. That may come. It may not. That's hers to work out. But every Saturday, my niece texts me first. I have never once texted her first, and I am not going to. That is hers to choose. I am not going to be one more adult in that family who chooses for her. My mother told me to keep my mouth shut and not embarrass us. I did exactly what she said. It cost her everything.